This
And
conference will now be recorded.
all right, so firstly, anyone, any questions, guys, before I get started? The last we met on Wednesday, and we were talking about how to go ahead and create. Let's say I have a .NET Core application. We went ahead and created a Docker file for it, and then we were telling how to go ahead and let's say run that particular application, and how to go ahead and let's say use that particular Docker file out here and create an image out of it. So, anyone, any questions before I get started, guys? Any questions that I can take before I can get started? Again, until now, what we have been doing is that we created a virtual machine. So we had a VM of our own, and then on that particular VM, we went ahead and we were going ahead and let's say building those images. We were storing those images in that particular VM and so on and so forth. But in today's demo, I want to give you all a hint of how to go ahead and let's say again, if you have a VM, I'm okay with that. But if you don't want to do all this on a VM, I want you to try going ahead and installing something called as a Docker desktop. Something called as a Docker desktop that I want to let's say go into. Now this is a development environment, so you can go ahead and when you say development, in order to let's say build my images, in order to let's say go ahead and do something, I don't need to go ahead and let's say install my Dockers really. I don't have to let's say go ahead and create a virtual machine, install Docker on top of it and all that stuff. I don't have to do that. I don't have to do the entire regular procedure. But again, if your system doesn't support, if your system doesn't have enough space, you can still go ahead and do create a virtual machine and install the Docker on top of it. The same procedure that we were doing, literally the same thing that we're doing out there. Is it's not a problem for me. But if you are interested to go ahead and let's say install the Docker desktop, these are the steps. So every step is clearly mentioned on what you need to do, and each and every step needs to be run on a Windows PowerShell admin terminal. So this is the first step, which is called enable a feature, and then there is a restart, and then you have to go ahead and let's say download something called as a Docker, as something known as a Windows subsystem for Linux. So once you download and install this out, make sure that you restart this computer, restart your system, and then please go into this link, and this is called install Docker on Windows. Here you have a link called install Docker desktop for Windows out here. So you'll have to first run all these commands firstly, and I have also mentioned when you need to restart your system. So you'll have to make sure that you restart your system out here. So just go ahead and perform all these things. So one, two, and then the third one after the restart, fourth step, and then finally go ahead and install something called as a Docker for desktop, or Docker desktop for Windows, sorry. And you would get an icon something like this. So if I go ahead and say tell Dockers, it will go ahead and let's say run Docker on my Windows system out here as such. So this is what I'm trying to do out here right now. And before you do this, you also need to let's say go ahead and uh, download and install Docker, and then you can log in and all that stuff. You can download and all these things out. One thing that I wanted to check out is how do you do this. So if you go ahead into the manual installation steps, I want you to read this particular documentation. There is something called WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, meaning there is a Linux machine that you install on your Windows system out here. Again, completely based upon your system space, it's good to have. So just scroll down and the same steps I have just given here. It's sitting down to the package and all that stuff. And finally, one thing that I forgot to mention in that particular documentation is this. There is something called Microsoft Store. Looks something like this. In this, if you go ahead and before you go ahead and install the Docker, please make sure that once after you finish all these steps and everything is ready, make sure that you go into Microsoft Store and you install something known as an Ubuntu operating system. So just click on Ubuntu and just go ahead and say install that out, and you would get something called Ubuntu. So I'll also mention this out here. So I'll say Step 5, install Ubuntu latest by going into the Microsoft Store. So your store is going to look something like this. It will take some time to load this out, and it's being facing some authentication issues and stuff like that. So once you go ahead and do that, what you're going to have is that you're going to have two things. One is an Ubuntu terminal. So if you say Ubuntu, so in my case, there's something like an application that I downloaded from the store. So this is Ubuntu terminal. I'll just open this out, and this will simply give me a, let's say, an Ubuntu operating system that is running on my system. So it will give me something like this, and I went ahead, used some commands, and installed Docker. So here, if you see, my Docker is already there; it's already running. So this is how it look like, telling that okay, fine, the Docker is actually running, and so on and so forth. And what I wanted to do is that here in the settings button, before you get started, click on the settings, and you have something called resources, and there's something called WSL integration in resources. So in under settings, under resources, there's something called WSL integration. If you click this here, it will by default be switched, will be switched off. Please switch it on so that you can use the underlying Ubuntu that is running right now in order to go ahead and run Docker. So now if I say Docker version on my local system, I'm able to see what is the Docker version that is installed. I'm able to see all these things out here as such. So now, even if you observe my, let's say, machine again, let's see if the Microsoft Store loads. Fine, I'll come back to that in a second, in a minute. So if you look at my system, I have something called Linux that is installed on my Windows system out here. And whatever files that I want to access here, right? There is a folder called Ubuntu under this one, and I have a home, and all the files that I want to access would be under this particular folder. So I can go ahead, take whatever files that I need, put it inside this particular folder. So I have multiple things like Docker file and all that stuff that I've been, let's say, building out here. I can use all those things out here, and I can create my own Docker images without having to have a virtual machine at all. So I don't have to, let's say, really have a virtual machine. I can simply go ahead, install all these softwares on my local machine, and then get started. Like I as a developer, this is what I'm doing, or I as a DevOps engineer, this is what I'm doing, using something called as a Docker desktop. Again, this is the link to, let's say, the document. Again, I'm not sharing this link because I've already shared a lot of links out here. So in the same, let's say, folder which has Docker commands, I have Docker Windows .txt. Make sure that you follow these things. Tell how this is running. So I have told you where this needs to be run. Everything, every command that you see here needs to be run on an administration terminal. You cannot run this out of, let's say, the normal terminal out here. And once you restart all these things, install the Ubuntu latest version by going to the Microsoft Store, and finally go ahead and install the Docker desktop. Please go ahead and install this out. And once you install this out, you can go into the settings of your Docker desktop, say resources WSL integration, and you can go ahead and integrate this out, or integrate your Ubuntu operating system out here that is running out here. And I can use this Ubuntu terminal. I have something now called as an Ubuntu terminal right now in order to run my Docker commands. So whatever I did on that particular, let's say, VM, I don't have to now go ahead and, let's say, use a VM every time, because I can cut down my cost there. I don't have to use the VM every time. I can simply go ahead and use this particular terminal out here as such. Yes, any questions here? Anyone, any questions here? Anyone, any questions? And are you all following, guys? What is the need for a Docker desktop? And again, I'm pretty much telling that this is optional. If you have space in your system, if you want to try out a lot of Dockers, you can install, you can go ahead with all these procedures, install this out, get it ready. If you do not have space, shouldn't be a problem. You can go ahead, still use a virtual machine in order to, let's say, do your development and test. Yes, any questions here?
So good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good, please.
Uh, Sir, means if you go with the Docker desktop, so no need to create this Linux virtual machine, right, sir? We
Not
are
at all.
not using like a
Just
virtual platform. You're just using a local platform only to
exactly,
run
you're
all these.
using the local platform to build your images, test your images, and once the images are finalized, then you can store your images on the cloud, and then we'll see where in which platform the actual application runs. This is a testing environment. That's it. Just like my virtual machine was a testing environment, this is now a testing environment for me.
Oh, that means where exactly the container is going to run, sir, after doing this? After we are
We'll
going with
see that.
this Docker. Okay,
Yeah, we'll see that on how the container is going to run, and how can I see the contents inside the container? How can I test this out? But
okay, okay,
very
sir. And
importantly, these are go please.
okay, okay.
Please, you had a
And
question.
one thing, sir.
Hmm.
Hmm, for each and every application having different Docker file, right, sir? For
Hmm.
.NET having a different Docker file, Java has a different Docker file, right, sir?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you, sir. That's it.
Okay. Yes. Any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions out here? Again, just to tell you all how to install this out. Just follow this particular documentation. Everything's there in this documentation out here. And finally, this is what I was telling. Before you go ahead and install, let's say a Docker desktop, come to Microsoft Store. Just type in Ubuntu or Linux or whatever it is. Now here I have something called Ubuntu as an application. You have multiple versions of Ubuntu out here. You can choose any of the versions out here. I would say go for something latest 22.04 LTS, or you just have Ubuntu. Just go ahead and install this out. Once you install this out, you'll have an application called Ubuntu out here. And after that, install this particular application called Docker Desktop. Going to the Docker documentation. You go to Docker documentation, you'll have this particular file. Just go ahead and install this out. It will take about 2 or 3 minutes, and once that's done, it'll ask you to restart. And once a restart is done, it will give you something like this. So if you look at your PC, right, and if you look at multiple drives here, you have a drive called Linux. This is where your Linux is running from. And if I go into a folder called Ubuntu and go into a folder called Home, you'll have your username out here. I have my username called classes Azure DevOps. You'll have your username, and it'll tell you, okay, fine. All these are the folders you can go ahead and use this out. So if I go here, if I say ls, I have two folders called certificate and Docker POC. Cert and Docker POC out here. This is what I've been using. Now what I want to do is that as a continuation from the last class, let's go ahead and let's do one thing. So in the last class, right, we have something called Docker contents. After this one, I had something called .NET Docker, inside which I had a sample app, and inside that particular sample app, we went ahead and did a publish. So I produced a folder inside which we went ahead in and created something called as a Docker file. So I'll just open this out with Notepad right now. Look something like this. It says, okay, fine, from that particular image called Microsoft SDK 3.1, go ahead and use something called as a working directory. Copy everything. Whatever are the contents inside this particular folder, copy everything out here and make sure to run this particular command called entry point. And on that particular entry point, we are trying to, let's say, run this particular DLL. Now, do you all remember this, guys, that we built an image here? Does anyone need a recap with the same thing? Do you all remember how did we get to this particular point?
Yes, sir.
So what I'll do, very simply, instead of copying, last time when we saw, we went and copied all these particular publish folder, right, into the virtual machine. Now what I'll do, I'll just copy all this particular publish folder, go into my Linux, go into this particular folder called Ubuntu, into this particular folder called home, and I'll copy it here into my own machine out here. It's just a transfer of files. And once I do that, if I say ls, now I have the publish. So if I say cd and go into publish, say ls out here, I have my Docker file, I have all these things out here right now. So again, in order to build the image, I'll say Docker build -t, the name of the image. Anything, like for example, I'll say .NET Core image. I'll say dot to go ahead and get it the Docker, let's say, file out here, and I'll say enter. As and when I do this, right now, if you see this, it's now telling, okay, fine, I'm building this out and I'm understanding what are all the commands, and it's telling, okay, fine, you know what? I understand that I need to go ahead and let's say download a Docker image. So it's telling, okay, fine. Now, since it's your local machine, it'll take some time to go ahead and do this downloads. So it's now telling, okay, fine, I'm going ahead and downloading this particular file or this particular image from the .NET SDK core. And after that, it's extracting all this image. And once this is done, it'll move one step from the other. So it'll tell, okay, fine, you know what? I see that there's an image. After that, it'll say, okay, fine, you are issuing a copy command. So it's telling, okay, fine, working directory. Then I have a copy command. It's exporting the image. And now I have an image out here. So now if I just go ahead, I'll say clear. If I now go ahead and say Docker images, there's this image, just ignore this out. This is something that I've been doing, let's say some testing that I've been doing out here. But this is my image, which is telling this is .NET Core image latest version and 17 seconds created about 17 seconds ago and so on and so forth. And if I go to my Docker desktop, right, the application, and go to the home page of the same, go to the home page of the same, in the image, I now see an image out here telling that, okay, fine, I created this image less than a minute ago. Size of the image is about 719 MB out here and just created out here as such. And if you go on containers, you also tell, okay, fine, what are all the containers that got created? And these are all the containers basically that I created a couple of, let's say, days ago. So I'll just delete them. I can click on them and delete them out. So I don't need this container. So it's giving you a good UI to go ahead and let's say do all these things. Now, what I'll do is I'll run this container, which is docker.net core image. So I'll say docker run hyphen hyphen name. I'll give a name telling that this is a .NET container hyphen p. I'll say 8080 and then I'll say hyphen d, and then I'll go ahead and let's say give the name of this particular image, and again copy and paste. Control C, Control V works here, and I'll say enter. So whatever command that I am issuing on the virtual machine, I'm running it here. And now if I say docker ps, it's now telling me, look, yes, you have a container that is running in the background. This is all good. Now, this was a question, is that how do I check the containers? So as and when I create a container, right, it's now telling, okay, fine, this is the Docker container. This is the image that is running. It's 25 seconds ago. It's just started. And it's telling, okay, fine, if you want to look at this, go to a local host. And local host means in your local machine, go to a port called 80. If I click on this, right, this is going to open my browser telling this is localhost 80. Again, if I give you the same URL, this won't work for you. The reason being, this is my machine. This is the localhost port on my particular machine out here. And that's the reason I'm able to get this particular content super fast. Again, good for developments. So I developed this out. Instead of going ahead and creating a virtual machine, I just went ahead and let's say did all these things on my local machine out here. Created all these things out. Everything is good. Now I just went ahead and let's say told that, okay, fine, it is 8080. And now on localhost 8080, I'm able to see the same content what I was able to see on a virtual machine. So this now enables me to do a lot of developments instead of going ahead and let's say, if you had a virtual machine, right? Every time you want to change something, you have to go inside the VM, do a WinACP, copy all the contents, and again go ahead, do some command upgrades and all that stuff. Again, build those images and etc. Instead of doing all those things on that particular machine, I'm now telling this is a better alternative, and also it gives you a good UI, telling the location what are all the images that you have, and what are all the images that are in use, what are all the containers that you're running, and also if you just click on this particular container, it'll just go ahead and open your local browser out here and tell you what is the content, what kind of content that you are able to see out here, and so on and so forth out here as such. Any questions here? Anyone? Any questions here? Again, from the last time, I'm not re-explaining the Docker file because we looked at Docker file, what Docker file really is in the last session. Took that particular Docker file, built an image right now, and I'm now running this particular image out here from my machine, from my local laptop. I am building the Docker image. And once I build the Docker image, I'm running the Docker container out of my local machine. Again, you can have multiple containers running out of your local machine on different ports of your local machine. It is allowed, super fine. It's allowed. You can go ahead and let's say create multiple containers, test this out, and if you want, you can kill the containers or stop the containers and all that stuff out here as such. Yes. Any questions here? Anyone? Any questions here?
Sir, here, how can, sorry, once allocating the port numbers, how
Mhm.
can add the inbound rules, sir, in the local machine? If
You
you
don't
go with
have
a
to add the
different
inbound
port
rule.
number,
You don't have to add the
sorry.
inbound rule. You don't have to add the inbound rule in your local machine. You don't have to
Okay,
do
okay,
that.
sir.
You can have this container running on any port number. Again, if you see, I'll run the same image but a different container name. I'll say sample container, and let's say I put a 8080 out here. Say enter. So I'm now running a different container right now on a port called 8080. Do you see localhost 8080? I have this particular image running. This is since your local testing, you're not really giving this URL to anyone. Inbound rules and all these things comes into picture when you want to access it over the internet. This is not the internet at all. This is my local host. That's it. It's a local machine. If I give this URL to you, you won't be able to access it. This is just my testing environment. So if you click on this particular URL on your machine, you won't get any response because this is not exposed over the internet. This is only on my local machine, only for my local testing out here. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, sir. And one thing, sir, in this, while
Mhm.
running this container, means, is it required to give the means detached mode
It's good to
console?
give a detached mode. Again, if you don't give a detached mode, if I don't do this, and let's say I run another container called sample container 1, and say I do a port called 9090 or something like that. What happens is that again it gets attached to your console. Your container will run. Your container will run. So, for example, 199080, your container will run. If I click on this, you get all these, let's say, logs and all that stuff. So, if I refresh the screen multiple times, right, you'll be able to see that here it's still in an attached mode out here. So, you won't be able to run any, let's say, you won't be able to, let's say, run any commands here. So, that's the reason I would say run it in a detached mode. And
Okay,
again,
sir. Thank you.
to shut it down, I just did a control C and it just got shut down out here as such. Yes. Again, if you see this container is going away, I can delete this out permanently from this UI. And these two containers are also running. I can just go ahead and stop them, start them. I can say stop the selected items, and it'll all stop this particular, let's say, containers out here. I want to start this. I can start this. Up to me. So I don't want this particular container called sample. I'll delete this out. You can check all those things in the Docker logs only. In the Docker PS, nothing. Docker PS -a. You have one particular container which is in a stop state. I just went ahead and let's say stop this out, which is a Docker sample container that I do have out here as such. So Docker Desktop works best for local development environments. Like it's one of the best tools that I have encountered for local development environments. Very friendly, very useful. You don't have to really create a virtual machine every time that you're doing a Docker. You can just go ahead follow these particular steps. Install Dockers, then go ahead build your images. Whatever we did on the VM, right? I'm doing it on my local machine right now. So it gives me that particular capability to go ahead and run all those things in my local machine out here as such. Yes, any more questions here before I move forward with this. Okay, so this is what I did. See, I have all my Docker images on my local machine. So if I say Docker images, I have this particular image that I'm really interested into, which is called .NET Core image and all those things out here as such. Now, your local development environment is good. It's super good. You can go ahead and create your own containers. You can do all these things out here, etc. So on and so forth. It's really good. But the issue is that, see, if something happens to my machine, let's say tomorrow my machine gets crashed or my machine gets stolen, anything can happen, right? It's a physical machine. My OS can get corrupted. Couple of things out here that I'm telling. If these scenarios happen, there should be a space where I can retrieve this particular images from. There should be a space where I can go ahead and retrieve this particular images from, and that's where I'm getting in something called as a container registry. Container registries are nothing but, it's nothing but a repository that you can create online, and you can store your images so that you can use it for the future purposes and all that stuff. And one of the registries that we've been dealing with till now was hub.docker.com. This is called as a Docker Hub registry. You can go ahead sign in. You can all, or you can go ahead and optionally sign up for it. You can go ahead and, let's say, sign up for something called Docker Hub and start using that out. Or a better way or better alternative to do is something called as an Azure Container Registry. So something called container registries that are running as a part of Azure. It offers you better redundancy. It offers you a better SLA and so on and so forth. So if I say create this out, so it's now telling, okay, fine, you know what, I have this registry and all that stuff, and I can just go ahead and say demo RG, something like that. And here it's asking me what is the name of the registry. I'll say it is a sample registry POCs2, something like this. After the as and when I give that, it's saying sample registry UCs2 dot Azure cr.io container registry.io. Then I'll say sorry, then I'll say this is in EastUS2. This particular registry is created in EastUS out here. I'll just scroll down, and there are three different SKUs it offers: basic, standard, and premium. When I say basic, it's nothing but the storage space that you're going to get in the background. The storage space basically that you're going to get in the background. So in a basic, you get around 10 GB of storage space. So in a basic, you go ahead and, let's say, get around 10 GB of storage space out here. In a standard, you get about 100. In a premium, you get about 100 as well. But in a premium, you get multiple options like virtual network integration and all these things. So what I'll do for my testing, I'll go with basic. I'll go with basic out here. I'll say networking disabled, encryption also disabled. Tags optional. You can go and give your tags out here. And I'm doing a review and create out here as such. And I'll say create. So I am now creating a repository, and I'm now creating, let's say, a registry out here, which will now help me go ahead and start storing all my images out here as such. So just a second, I'll just close this out and reopen this out. So this is now going to give me a space. This is now going to, let's say, go ahead and give me some space out here on the cloud, wherein I can go ahead and start storing and also version controlling my images. What do I mean by that? So right now I have the sample registry. It's telling me, yes, you have around 10 GB of space in order to store this out. This is the name of the registry, which is called sample registry ucs2.azurecr.io. When was it created? What is the SKU? What is the provisioning state? All these things. If I just scroll down under the settings, there's something called access keys. Just go here and say enable something called as an admin user. Just enable this out. This is one of the important steps that you need to do after the registry is created. And this is going to give you something like a username, password, and all these things. Good enough. And if I just scroll down, there is something called repositories. This is where you get to go ahead and store all your images. Repositories is nothing but an image repository out here. So what I want to do is that I want to now go ahead, use these particular images and push it inside the container registry out here that is there in Azure. So I have a container registry in Azure. I just created this particular container registry. I now want to go ahead and store all my images inside this particular container registry that is running on Azure. And before I do that, I have to first log in inside Azure. I have to do a login into Azure out here. So from my local machine, I'll run a command called az space login. Again, az space login is an Azure CLI command. So if you were following Terraforms very closely, you might have already have, let's say, all the Terraform modules installed. So I'm just logging into Azure using this particular command line telling az space login. I'll say yes, I'll sign into my Azure account. Same thing like the way I did with Terraforms. So if you already have Azure CLI in your system, this az CLI will run on your systems. If you don't, please install, restart your systems, and you should have the az CLI out here. And then since I have multiple accounts, the az account set hyphen subscription, and I'll give this particular name of the subscription out here. I'll say enter. So I'm now setting my context to understand what kind of a subscription that I need to, let's say, have. Once the login is done, once the context is set, I'll now go ahead and I'll now go ahead and run one more command to log into the registry, to log into this particular container registry. So what I'll do, I'll say I'll say az space acr Azure Container Registry space login hyphen name. So az acr login space hyphen name, and I'll copy this entire link. Is it here? I'll say enter. Actually, okay, fine. I'm trying to log inside this particular server with something called sample registry. It will take around 2 or 3 minutes to establish the login. It will authenticate your account. It will do a couple of things. And now it's saying, okay, fine. I'm trying to log inside this particular server called ACR, and I'm running one particular command called az acr login. So I have one simple command telling az acr login hyphen the name of the registry out here dot something called azurecr.io. I got everything from here. So these are the steps. I build the image. I have the image on my local machine. So if I do a Docker images, I get all the list of images out here, and I can also see what are all the images that are there on my machine using the UI. It's also connected to Docker Hub, not needed because I'm using the Azure Container Registry out here. It's telling what this is how, let's say, the images are and so on and so forth. I'm saying okay, fine, I'm good with this. And now I want to push all my images, and this is where I'm running all my commands telling az acr login or az login firstly, and then going ahead and trying to log in inside my registry out here by issuing a command called az acr login and then giving the name of this particular registry. And I'm trying to, let's say, push all the images out here inside the registry out here. Again, it'll take some time to go ahead and, let's say, log into this particular registry. And once it's logged in, you should get a message telling login succeeded, something like this. So it took around 2 or 3 minutes it will take. So please give it some time, to make sure that this is logged in. And once logged in, what I want to do is that I have this particular Docker image called .NET Core image out here. I want to push this particular image into my Azure Container Registry. In order to do that, I will now issue a command called docker push. I'm telling, okay, fine, docker push. Please go ahead and push this out. space the name of the image. So I'm copying the image. So I'm telling, go ahead, do something called as a Docker push. The name of the image is .NET Core image out here, and say enter. So it's now telling, okay, fine, I'm trying to use the latest tag, meaning this particular image with the latest tag out here. It's telling, okay, fine, and I'm trying to push this particular image. Again, will take a minute or so. Since it's a local machine, it'll take some time. Now it's telling, okay, fine, I'll try to push this particular image into the registry that you logged in. So this is the registry, and if the push is successful, you should be able to see a repository with this particular name out here. A repository with the name of the image, and that's what it's trying to do right now. So it's trying to say, okay, fine, I'm trying to use the latest tag, and I'm trying to push that image into your Docker, and once it's pushed, it's telling, okay, fine, I'm trying to push and all that stuff. And you see what you're getting here? Requested access to the resource is denied. Can anyone tell me where are we trying to push the image, guys? Can anyone tell me where are we trying to push this particular image to?
Container registry.
Okay, but are we really pushing it to container registry? Or where are we pushing this to? So do you see here it's telling there's something called docker.io is where I'm trying to push this to, which means that did I anywhere tell that please go ahead and push this to the container registry? Did I anywhere tell, okay, the name of the registry is this, please go ahead and push the image? No, I did not tell. And by default, if I do a docker push command, it's telling, okay, fine, I'll go ahead and push this out into the container, sorry, into let's say the Docker hub without you telling me where I need to push it. I'll just try to push it out into the Docker hub and it's failing because I don't have an ID with Docker hub. I've never signed in. I've not done anything. So it'll fail. So this is gonna fail. The thumb rule here is that the name of your image, the name of the image should contain the name of your registry. Only then Docker will understand, okay, where is your registry and how do I push the image out here. So what I can do is this is the name of the registry and now issue a command called docker tag or docker image tag. The existing name, which is .NET Core image, space, the name of the registry, forward slash, the image name that you want to, let's say, create. Let's say I want to create an image called .NET version 1. I'll say enter. What it did right now is this. If you look at Docker images right now, I have an image called .NET Core. I have just copied this image, created a new version of it, but this new version has the name of my registry, the name of the repository, and the version. So now, if I do a Docker push by giving all these things, colon version 1 is what I want to, let's say, push out. I'll say enter. Now it will identify that yes, you are now trying to push this entire image into something called as a container registry out here because the name of your image right now contains the name of the registry and tell yes, this is where you want to push this out, and in a minute or two it'll identify yes, I will prepare this entire image to push it, and in a minute or two if you go into your browser back again and look into your repositories, you should be able to see a repository coming in now once the push is done. Now it's telling push, and now this is the thing that I did. I did an sorry, I did an image tag. I said what is my source. Source here is a docker.net core image. I said what is my destination, and in the destination I had something called as an Azure cr.io, meaning the registry where I want to push this into, forward slash the name of the image that I want to create. And if I look at this, this is the entire image that I got. It's telling this is the name of your image and this is the version tag. It's telling version 1 and so on and so forth. Now it's telling yes, it refers to this particular registry. You already logged into this particular registry. Now it's telling okay fine, I'm pushing all these layers. It's not giving me an error like the one it gave me earlier. It's not now giving me the error out here. It's telling okay fine, I'm pushing all these images into your Docker registry out here. And it can be any registry, it can be any private registry, it can be an Amazon registry, or it can be an Azure container registry like the way we have right now. It can be anything, but you need to make sure that the image name has this particular tag. And once it's done, it's telling yes, all this is pushed, this is good enough. And if I come here, refresh this out, I now have something called .NET, inside which I have something called version 1, version controlling, meaning you can have multiple versions of your images that are there. So if tomorrow I go ahead and change something, not this one, sorry, if I go ahead and change something tomorrow, and let's say that I have multiple files out here, if I go ahead and want to change something, I can go ahead and create a version 2 of the image also. I can say version 2 and I can store this out. So let's say that your developer goes ahead and changes something. Now you want to build a new version of your image. So you can so you can issue the same command out here, telling it is docker build. So all these my commands. So let's see, docker build. I did a docker build, yes. And you can say the name of the image directly. You can give it as the name of your registry, and then all these things are. Sorry. So if you were to build something, you can say tag is this forward slash .NET version 2, and let's see, yeah, dot, and I can go ahead and now build the entire image. So now I have an entire image out here. So if I say Docker images, I now have this particular image with version 2. So this is the version 2. So this is something that I built. This is something that I now built after my developer has done some changes, some code changes out here. I can build a version 2, and I can simply go ahead and do a Docker push again. Instead of version 1, I'll say version 2 and I'll say enter. Very simple. It'll again take this particular image, the new version of your image. It'll again push back into this particular registry, and once it's done pushing, you will see the same repository called .NET. Inside that, now you'll be able to see version 1 and version 2 of the image copies that is produced out here, and you're saving all these images out here on the cloud. So you're saving all that particular images on the cloud right now. You can use it further. I mean, you can use these particular images further. We'll see how can you use this particular image. But any questions still here? Anyone? Any questions still here that I can take? Again, whatever I'm teaching will be Greek and Latin if you haven't practiced the earlier sessions. On Wednesday was the last session that we had, and on that particular day we went ahead, we were understanding what is a Docker file, how do you build an image out of the Docker file and all that stuff. If you do not practice that, all this will be very Greek and Latin, guys. It will be super Greek and Latin if you do not practice that out here. So this session is nothing but a continuation of Wednesday, but today I'm going ahead using something called as a Docker hub out here, sorry, as a Docker desktop out here, and I'm going ahead building my own images out here as such. Yes, any questions still here? Anyone? Any questions still here? And then if you see, it's saying okay fine, this is all pushed up into, let's say, this particular registry. If I just refresh this right now, I now have a version 2. So had a version 1, now I have a version 2, and as and when your updates are done to this particular image, you can have a version 3, you can have a version 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. You can have multiple versions of your images out here as such. Yes, any questions here? Anyone? Any questions still here? So I have all my images here inside the content registry, and I'm using this commands called docker push out here again. All these commands are there inside this particular file. So if you just scroll down, I have the docker image tag. Sorry, I have, let's say, the docker image tag out here, telling the image tag, the source, and the target latest. And I've also given an example of how do you do this, and you don't have to use sudo anymore because I'm using my local machine, so I don't have to do that. And then I have something called docker image push. I'm telling please take the entire image, push it out. You can do this multiple times for multiple versions of your images, and all these images are now being stored in the registry. So what I can do is that since all these images are there in the registry, right, I don't even need all these things. I don't even need all these images that I created. I can simply delete them. Again, there is this particular image. I think this is running, so that's the reason. Let's go to the container. Let's delete the container, then delete the image. So I can delete my all the images. I can save my space on my system. And if you check this out, Docker images. I only have one image out here, which I need. So I'm just saving this particular image. I don't need any other images because I have now saved all those particular images inside my container registry. It's on the cloud. So this is on the cloud out here as such. So it's ready. You can go ahead and let's say run this particular image again. Till now, running this image on my local machine was to just to test how it is running. That's it. I'm not really running this on a production environment. I'm just running this on my local machine in order to just understand how exactly is the image is performing, what exactly is let's say the output from this particular image and all that stuff. Once I get this understanding, I'm going ahead and storing all these images inside the ACR container registry out here. Once I have this inside the container registry, right, I can now decide where I want to run this image on. Because on the local, it's just for me, right? If I want to, let's say, expose this image to the entire world, again, I can have a, let's say, a virtual machine. I can create a virtual machine and I can run this out of a virtual machine out here. Again, if I create a virtual machine, the problem here is that I have to install Docker. I'll have to run my commands manually, expose my ports, and all these things out. So if I run this out, I can go ahead into the container registry, log inside the container registry. Just like I pushed, I can pull that image. I can run that particular image as a container, expose it out, all these things out here, which we've already seen. The best alternative, without going ahead and doing all these things, is to create an app service, an Azure app service. And in the past, right, when we created the app service, we just deployed the code onto the app service. Now, what I want to do is I want to deploy containers on my app service. Container. This is where I'm let's say now coming. I want to now run and or I want to now deploy and run containers from my app service out here. So now to do that, let me just go into the Azure portal, say app service out here. I'll say create a new app service, and this is what I'm going to do. I'll use the same RG. It can be a different RG, not a problem at all. I'll tell that this is the container app service. Do something like this. .azure websites.net. And now see, earlier it was asking publish. We said code, and we used to select .NET 3.1, and we used to create this out, right? Today I'm going to say it is Docker container. As and when I put a Docker container, the runtime option goes away because it understands that okay, fine, the runtime is inbuilt inside the container, so I don't have to give anything out here. And now, if you check this out, it's telling yes, what kind of an operating system you want. I'll say Linux. I'll say ECUS2. This is let's say the platform on which I want to go ahead and let's say run this on, and the region in which I want to go and run this on. I'll take the default plan and I'll say next Docker. It's now telling me okay, fine. Where's your Docker image? Can you please give me a Docker image out here? I'll say my Docker image. It's a single container. My Docker image here is inside the Azure Container Registry ACR. And as and when I do that, right, it's able to identify that yes, there is an Azure Container Registry inside the same resource group, inside the same region, and I'm able to see this particular name. Do you want to use this? And it's telling, okay, fine, what is the image? I only have one image called .NET, but I have multiple versions of that image, version 1 and version 2. I'll say, okay, fine, please go to use version 2. I'll say networking, I'll monitoring, I'll just disable everything right now, and I'll create this out. So instead of now taking my code and deploying it out after my app service is created. So imagine me doing, let's say, the app service. So if I go ahead and create the app service, I used to go and take the code, do a build, do a publish, and then get it prepared. I'm not doing anything right now. I have all my images. I'm now telling that which image that you need to use. And since this is a platform as a service, internally it'll go and run all your commands telling docker pull, docker run, create a container. And as and when this particular app service is getting ready, it'll go ahead and start a container also. So it'll go ahead, let's say, start a container, keep it ready. This is what it's trying to do out here as such. So it's going ahead, doing a container, getting the container ready, and getting the application ready out here as such. This is what on an end-to-end basis is doing. And this can be one of the platforms where I can run my containers on. I can take my container, one of the platforms where I can run my container on out here as such. So if I just wait for some time, it's creating the app service plan. And after that, it'll create the app service. And if you see this, now this particular app service is running a container on top of it. It's now going ahead and running a container on top of it. So if I say browse, it's telling container app service dot azure websites dot net, and it's now trying to open up that particular container. And this is what I have. Then this is my .NET Core and all that stuff. And this is the URL that I can give it to everyone. I mean, this is the URL that I can go ahead and expose to the world. And you can click on this, and you can now see that yes, my container is now exposed to the world. You can just go ahead and, let's say, click on this particular link and kind of take a look at this one out here as such. Yes, any questions still here? Anyone, any questions still here?
Uh, Sir, once we delete the images from the Docker desktop, how can pull back from the Docker registry, sir? Container registry. Is it possible?
Good question. Definitely, it is possible. How can you pull it back from the container registry? Definitely, good question. It's possible. That's the reason I have it stored in the container registry. So what I can do is that if you go into your container registry, right? If you have the repositories out here, we stored all these things, right? So if you go here, you have version 2. If you click here, it now tells, okay, fine. If you want to pull this image, issue this command, telling docker pull name of your registry / the name of the image and the tag of the image. So if I copy this out, go into my Docker again. In order to do this, you have to do an AZ login and also an AZ ACR login. Two things. You'll have to be logged in out there. Paste this command, telling docker pull. Again, where do I give this command? Simply went into my image, got this command, and say enter. This will now start pulling your image from this particular registry. So just like we did docker pull nginx, and it went ahead into the Docker hub and pulled that particular image. Now I'm telling, just like I said push, I'm now telling pull the name of the registry / the name of the image and also the tag of that particular image. It's now going getting that particular specific image out there, trying to pull down everything. So it's trying to pull all that particular image layers from your Docker hub out here. So yes, that's the reason we go ahead and store this out. In case if it gets deleted, can I pull it back? Can I do some modification? So as a development team, right? What or as a developer or as a DevOps engineer, what we try to do is that very frequently we go ahead and, let's say, try to do this pull operations, get the latest image, see what is there in the image, see how can I change that, see how can I improve that, make a new version of it. Let's say version 3 or version 4 and so on and so forth. So it will take some time because this is communicating with, let's say, the Azure Container Registry, and since it's a local machine, right, it'll take like about 2 or 3 minutes out here. So once you are done with that, it'll go ahead and, let's say, try to pull all that particular image. And now it's telling, okay, fine, pulling that layer, the layer already exists and all that stuff. Now it's telling, okay, fine, this is the image version. Now you can say Docker images. Now I have this image out here. If you want to run this, you can also run this on a local. Shouldn't be a problem at all. So this is how you go ahead and pull this out. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks.
Yes. Any more questions here, guys?
Sir, and one thing, sir, how can you check the list of images in the container registry from this PowerShell, sir? Using
In the
is that
PowerShell, using PowerShell, yes, you can do something called AZ ACR image list or something like that. So let's see. Images in ACR using PowerShell. commands for that. Create a private registry and all that stuff. Sign in the account and all that stuff. So it's telling, okay, fine, push the image gallery, tag the image, push the image. You have commands for it. I don't really remember the command out of my head, but I think it is ACR image list images. You see this, right? This is repository list, and if I just scroll down, there is something called image list as well. Let's see if I have that command and if I can just run this out of the box. But yes, it should be there somewhere. I don't really remember the command out of my head. Let's see, images, which will show all the images and all that stuff. So there should be a command like that. But yes, you can use these commands out here to go ahead and let's say check out all your registries out there. I can send you the command across. I just need to check that out, and I can send that out to you across out there as such. But yes, you can go ahead and use an image list or let's say a registry list out here and so on and so forth. I just need to check the right command out here. Let's see. So repository list and then something like this. So let's do this. This is the repository list. Also need the image list out here. So show tags and all that stuff. Yes. So you can do that. You can have multiple commands out here and go ahead and let's say list your images. So you can do AZACR image list or let's say AZACR repository list and go ahead and get all the list of your images or your repositories that are running on top of let's say your ACR out here as such. Yes, any more questions, guys?
Okay, sir. That means before going to run that command, we have to log into the ACR, right, sir?
Yes, you have to log into the ACR. Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
From any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions again? This is again a
So
continuation,
like
guys. Go ahead, please.
yeah, like you have to told like we can Docker Hub we can use as a repository.
Yes.
If we are doing any like codes like for the project, so if we are uh, storing in Docker Hub, it is like I think
Mhm.
it's a public access, like if everyone can use. It will be not a
Not,
restriction project side.
not really. Again, in Docker Hub also you get public and private registries. So if you go to hub.docker.com, right? So if I say hub.docker.com and if I say explore, all these are publicly available images.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also go ahead and let's say register yourself. You can get a Docker ID out here. So you can give a username, password, your email address, and all these things out. You can get a Docker ID. And once you
Mm-hmm.
get a Docker ID, you can go ahead and store that out. That will become a private registry. Until unless you
Okay.
don't go ahead and log in, it won't go ahead and let's say pull that image and all that stuff. Just like ACR, you can also go ahead and let's say have a private registry out here as such.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions here? Okay, so in tomorrow's session, again, we'll have a session tomorrow. In tomorrow's session, we will see how do you do all these process using a CI/CD pipeline. Meaning, today what I did is that I built my image on my local machine. I did all these things, right? So I want to now understand how do I build my image, how do I push my image, how do I create the ACR using let's say something like an ARM template or a Terraform, and try to let's say push the image using a pipeline completely. So again, guys, I want you all to first look at what is a Docker image. That is the very basic. If you are not understanding that, the rest of the sessions will just be Greek and Latin out here. Again, very, very importantly, my humble request to everyone is that please go ahead and do the Docker sessions right from the beginning. Each and every session is a continuation to the other. And right from the starting, if you're able to follow this out, you would appreciate that this is let's say very simple. Just go and create a Docker, let's say uh, the Docker desktop on your system. Just go ahead and do whatever you were doing using a virtual machine that you were able to do using a virtual machine out here as such. So it'll become very simple for you to, let's say, go ahead and do a build and all that stuff, test it out. And now I'm telling how can I run this out. Once I build this out, where can I run this out, and so on and so forth out here as such. So please try this out and let me know if you have any questions out here as such. And we'll meet tomorrow and we'll see how can I go ahead and do all these things using a CI/CD pipeline in Azure. How can I build a CI/CD pipeline? How can I do this using a CI/CD pipeline out here as such? Until then, thank you and have a good day ahead, guys. Thank you.